Found a couple of random 110 negatives out of that batch I did that video on restoring those I found back when I made that trip home. See what's on these. Got that side panel out. It wasn't that bad. A few little tricky parts. Overall though, I think it was a good move because this is going to be flushed off now. Perfect little mounting point for this portion of the side panel, and then we're going to build the shelving in there. Not sure totally about the insulation. As you can see, we had this little guy here. I'm not sure what kind of little sensor that is. It runs up to this little, something to do with the child seat. And this guy right here. But there's actually a lot of storage space behind there. Of course, we've got the bottle jack here. So I think that was a good move. Probably not going to remove this one though, because like I said, this has a lot of storage back in here already, and this is where my AC and my 12 volt are located. So I think we'll just probably flush that up here, go up with the shelving on this side, and then this is going to be the main storage compartment for the side shelves here. So we'll see. So yeah, I think we're more or less ready to start on the actual build. So we are running out of light here, but I got to studying this little module that's wired in from what I think is a car seat attachment up to this other car seat attachment. I think this will all come out as one big unit with these little bolts here. I think these are 14 millimeter, as with most of the weight bearing sockets. Yes, those are 14 millimeter. So I'm going to take these out. There's a couple of little quick ties down here. I don't think I'll have to cut those because, like I said, I think all these cables are connected to this actual mount point, but we'll see. And yes, it absolutely comes out as one big chunk. Good to know. As I go about installing the sound deadening material here, just a few things to note. First of all, folks, this is obviously not a professional install. I had never done this before in my life. That being said, it was infinitely easier than I thought it would be. It was not hard at all. I essentially treated the entire thing like one big jigsaw puzzle because that's what it is. All I had done here was peel off the material from, or excuse me, unfold the material rather, and then hold it up to the area that I wanted to fit it, worked my way around cutting it. I used just a plain little Gerber pocket knife type utility knife to cut it. I measured absolutely nothing. The backing paper has some grid lines on there that can help you out, but this stuff is more or less, oh, I knocked over the camera there, but this stuff is more or less re-applicable to a point, meaning if you mess up a little bit, you can peel it back off and then re-stick it. But really, if you just cut and measure as you go, it's not that much of an issue. Again, it wasn't that difficult. I had never done this before, and like I said, I don't see what the big deal was, but there are a few things to make note of. Make absolutely certain when you're applying this material you don't leave any gaps, any air bubbles in there, because if you do, any kind of temperature changes could cause condensation, and of course condensation trapped between metal, never a good thing. It can cause a lot of rust, essentially rust out the body of your vehicle. So make absolutely certain that you press out any kind of air gaps in between the material and the bottom of your vehicle. And speaking of that, this material is essentially a very tacky, almost unvulcanized type of rubber. It's very sticky, but it is backed and held together by this shiny aluminum backing material that can be shockingly sharp. Don't ask how I know that. So be very careful when you're cutting this out and pressing it down, because it is like a paper cut on steroids. You can actually really cut yourself before you realize it. So be extremely mindful when you're working with this kind of material, because like I said, it can fight back a little bit. I ended up covering the entire driver's side panel with this material, as well as the entire rear cargo area. I didn't put anything actually forward of that cross member that you see up front, because I'm going to have so much stuff in there, and there was such an irregular surface that I don't think it was really going to be an issue as far as any kind of sound going on. I think just inherently everything I was going to be carrying, plus the wood floor, was going to block out a lot of that sound anyway, so I didn't worry with that. So I just kept doing this all the way around until every single inch of bare metal was covered, and I think it turned out really, really well. I ended up going over a few of the little screw hole points and perforating those again to let out any kind of air, to get that material squished down as much as I possibly could to avoid any kind of condensation in the future. Keep in mind that this is a sound deadening material, and even though it says it's a thermal reflector, it is not an insulator. It has virtually little to no R value. That means it's not going to insulate. It just helps reflect heat back out, and honestly, it really does seem like it kept the rear of the 4Runner cooler after I had installed it. So this is not going to make your vehicle warmer in the wintertime. We're going to have to do some insulation, and that's what we're going to tackle here in just a few seconds. This is just standard foam carpet padding. Strangely enough, I looked it up. This actually has an R value of around, give or take, 1, depending on what you read, which is interesting because my Nemo, I think it's switchback, sleeping pad that I use for my backpacking and camping, that only has an R value of about 2. So this has about half that of my Nemo pad, which is really, really good, and at least for the way I sleep. So I think with the deadening material / insulation under that, plus the padding, plus all the layers of wood, add in everything else that's going to be actually in between the sides, the bottom of the vehicle, it's going to be a good bit of insulation. In fact, I can actually already tell it is extremely more cool inside the vehicle when I opened up the door earlier. I think a lot of that's due to this insulation reflecting back that heat. I don't know, at least it seemed that way to me. Just a quick fitment update. We've got our little corner beveled off here. It's fairly well perfectly mated to this at the rear. However, the space in between this side panel is about a 1/2 inch, and our plywood is about 1/2 inch. But it is just so snug, it actually gets smaller as it tapers off here. Then I'm going to have to bevel this entire edge, or as I suppose it would be this edge, to make it a little thinner, to slide all the way nice and even underneath this trim, because I really, really, really don't want to either cut this or remove this whole thing. Always watching. I actually removed a screw here. I thought that would give a little more leeway, but it did not. So I'm going to go ahead and, like I said, get the rasp and just take this down just a little bit. Maybe that'll work. Perfect. There's just a tiny spot. Come here, GoPro. Come here, I got you. There's a tiny spot here. I'm going to rasp that back just a little bit because that's preventing the floor from being just completely flush back here. There's maybe 2 or 3 millimeters difference. But as far as the fitment up here, absolutely like a glove. So I'm going to trim that just a little bit, get it actually seated, and then think about maybe putting a single mounting point right there across that cross member. So as far as dry fitment, size for a little tiny gap there, not too bad. I couldn't be more pleased with the measurements. I think I may, if that fits so well here at the side, I think I may cut this little corner, just round them off to really seat down on top of that. I think that's giving us a little bit of play. And then in the middle, we'll see, of course, after that corner is tailored. In the middle, I may need to put some type of cross support. In fact, I'm certain I will, because this is resting on that first cross member here, solid there, and I need a little bit more support here. Now, structurally, this is essentially our subflooring. This is what everything else back here is going to be built on. Shelves will attach here and here. Scanner compartment will be over here. But beneath all that, this whole thing, picture this, is going to be one big pull-out drawer. And we'll get to that when we get to that and you'll understand. But for now, I'm going to trim this corner, get that all ship shape, and then, yeah, go from there. As you can see, flying by the seat of my pants, which is fine. Well, I certainly didn't mean for this to happen, and I really am not sure still if it's going to work. Oh, hello, Bumblebee. But I was going to cut off these little, the leftovers from where the main base of the plywood was cut. And I happened to notice that the 5-inch boards that I got for the sides of my drawers are exactly about a ½ an inch on either side bigger than these slats. I'm saying that because I believe I can trim these off, these leftover plywood pieces. I've already got them marked. Use this section on either side to stiffen up the floor, and then have these as perfect side members for the drawer slides to attach to. Like I said, I don't know if that's going to work, but it kind of looks like it, and I think that's going to be just enough clearance. But yeah, we will find out in time. So I put those 2 little scrap slats, just put them under there, not attached to anything. That makes so much difference in how this sits. It's almost perfectly level. And when you put a little bit, I actually calculated a little bit of bow into this because of the weight that's going to go down on it. When you put pressure on this, I'm hoping that's going to essentially go flush with this little rear cross member. Of course, anything can happen. So what I want to do, I feel very good about this subflooring. I'm going to, for sure, put a couple screws underneath those little blocks. I'm going to leave those exactly where they are, roughly. And then after I get a few other things built on top of this, before I actually anchor it in the vehicle, I may put 1 or 2 more here in the middle. I just don't know. I mean, that's really solid. Yeah, it's one of those things we'll just have to, again, play it completely by ear. Something just to share, which is highly satisfying. When got the bubble level, and when you really put it down, it's a little bit off, as in this end is tilting that way. However, that's literally because of the, what's known is as the Toyota lean, to where this side, a lot of the weight's just there. So these Toyotas lean that way anyway. That's about as close to perfectly level as I would ever have hoped it to be. So that's good. I want to mention too, You will never see this again once I get everything on top of it, because on top of this will be another layer. This will be a drawer, and then everything else on top of that. So I'm not going just crazy with the finish on this bottom level. I want it to be, of course, you know, not just terrible, but I think I will use this as my stain test, because I got some gray stain. I have no idea what the difference is between smoke gray and stone gray, but I guess we'll find out. It was mentioned to me that dark gray might look good here, and I kind of scoffed at it to begin with, but I think they might have been right. So I'm thinking about going with a dark gray for the flooring, the drawers, and then maybe having the shelving just plain polyurethane, like a lighter color like this. I don't know, we'll see. That's like 50 steps ahead. All right, so yeah, going to screw on those little things, get it in there, and then test the stain real quick, and I think that's going to be a day. So on this side, we have our plain smoke gray, I think it is. Yeah, smoke gray stain. On this section, we have plain Jane polyurethane. I'm going to let these dry and then come back tomorrow, coat the gray with some polyurethane, and then compare the different finishes to see if I want to leave it just gray, what I'm going to leave just polyurethane. The good thing about this is the gray is actually oil based, so it's going to be more resistant to moisture just on its own without coating it in any polyurethane. At the same time, for durability, it's hard to beat just a nice shellacking of polyurethane, so we'll see. So really, I'm just going to wait until tomorrow, then we'll cut some more little bracing pieces, get the drawer system made, decide exactly how that's going to be divided up, and go from there. What else is there to say? Well, nothing, I guess.